Welcome back to the Jag Bros. I'm one of your hosts, JT Raymond, alongside my two brothers, Jack and Joey. We're three brothers that grew up in Jacksonville, longtime Jaguars fans, ridden the highs and the lows of Jaguar football through the time. And you know what? It may have been the offseason now for 3 or 4 weeks. We still have a little bit of football left with the Super Bowl ahead of us here in about a couple weeks. Guys, how much does it hurt watching these playoff games without the Jaguars in it?
It hurt a lot at the beginning, seeing some of the teams that I feel like we beat in the regular season and that we were better than. We could have had a good shot of beating the Browns the way that they played against the Houston Texans. But as you slowly got further into it, I see that our team is nowhere near ready to face off against the Chiefs, against the 49ers, against the Lions. All those teams just seem to be better than us in almost all positions.
100%, Joey. You know, it's sad to not have any Jaguars football. I'm already missing it, but it is good to have the Jag Bros back. We've missed y'all the last couple weeks, and glad to record an episode. Yeah, the Jaguar stock, it's pretty low. Look, the Texans looked very good in the first round of the playoffs, but I'm a buyer. I'm a buyer of the Jaguar stock right here at the bottom.
Hey, I love that, buying the Jaguar stock here at the bottom. And you know what? I do want to give a shout out to Wild Turtles, which gave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts recently. Said disappointed with the season, but not with the Jag Bros. These guys were fantastic. Haven't lived in Florida in years, but it was great to hear from these guys, getting me hyped for the game. Thanks, y'all. And thank you, Wild Turtles, for the review. As Jack mentioned, we love to interact with you guys on Twitter through some of the comments that you leave us through some of the apps. And so if you like the content, please leave us a 5-star review, as that helps the algorithms for us as we're continuing to build the brand of the Jag Bros. And so this is the off season, so we'll have a little bit different of a schedule for you, both with our cadence of interacting with you through podcast, as well as the typical rundown for these episodes. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about the defensive coordinator that was just hired a couple weeks ago from Atlanta. We'll also talk about the offseason, some of the goals, as well as the free agent things that we should be doing with the players that we currently have. We also want to zoom out and grade Trevor Lawrence and see how he actually stacks up, because I think we're going to have some interesting opinions on that one. And then we'll just kind of give you guys some updated off-season dates and what to watch for in the Senior Bowl as we're looking ahead to the NFL draft for the Jaguars. But Joey, introduce us to this defensive coordinator we just got.
Thanks, JT. We got Ryan Nielsen, the defensive coordinator from the Falcons last year, who did a really good job with the Falcons. He helped them go up in all their stats. They were much better sack numbers. He is a defensive line coach, played defensive line. He's been in the league for about 8 years, so he's still pretty young, and he's a big name. There was a lot of teams looking at him. I know at first we were blocked from interviewing him, but then for some reason the Falcons allowed us to go and interview him, and then we didn't let him out of the building. Doug and Baalke seemed to really like him, so they offered him on the spot, and he's already seeming to bring in some of his other defensive coordinators and helpers. Chris Richards is set to possibly come help out our secondary, and Corey Robinson, also the linebacker coach, 2 guys that worked with him back when he coached with the Saints on the defense. This is really good for Trayvon Walker and our defensive line that struggled last year, especially the interior defensive line. He's worked with Cam Jordan, Calais Campbell, so they've all had really good years under him. So I'm really excited to see what he does with our defense.
He's got his work cut out for him. It should be interesting to see. You know, a lot of the stats floating around right now is just the improvement the Falcons saw in 2023. But as you mentioned, Joey, he's had a great career. So he coached in college football on the defensive side of the ball for many years, most notably as the defensive coordinator at Northern Illinois, 2011 to 2013, and then defensive coordinator at NC State from 13 to 17. And then coached for the Saints for many years. But a lot of people are excited because for one, the Falcons are sad, which that's typically a good sign. And then two, statistically, the Falcons defense improved in 2023. So the three big stats that I notice is that their overall defensive ranking went from 23rd to 18th in terms of points allowed. Their ranking for yards allowed went from 27th to 11th, which is a huge jump. And then they doubled their sack total from 21 to 42. And the big word that I've heard a lot from Doug Peterson, that I'm hearing a lot just about Nielsen as a defensive coordinator and a coach, is aggressive. So he will play a much more aggressive defense than we've seen the last couple of years for the Jaguars, of kind of a bend but don't break. And hey, you pointed out, Joey, he played D-line. He's a big guy. And if Trent Baalke doesn't pick anybody up, he may be getting in the rotation at defensive line as well.
Doug's saying he's aggressive, but right now the statistics don't exactly show that for what Atlanta's defense was. They were 10 through 15th in pressure rate, hurry rate, or blitz rate. So really middle of the road when it comes to that. They were also bottom 5 in turnovers. And so, look, I'm kind of cherry picking stats to a certain extent, but if you're really thinking about aggression, that's kind of what Caldwell was. He was a guy who were either getting a turnover or were a very mediocre defense at best. This guy seems to be a slightly more consistent guy. You mentioned that the yards per play was better than Jacksonville, passing yards, rushing yards. I think in general, his base defense is solid. They certainly got more sacks than we did, but they're still kind of middle of the road when it comes to that in the NFL. Is this a home run hire? I don't necessarily think that. I think you're right, Jack. To me, what's encouraging is that a lot of the fans think that this was a good hire, and a lot of people love discounting. Well, fans don't know football and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but they can kind of tell. They can tell if the defense is heading in the right direction, if there's major problems. Personally, I never really thought there were major problems with the current defensive staff that we had. And so is this an improvement? Maybe slightly. And so the reason why the Jaguars were sitting at home in January was not because the defense completely underachieved. In fact, they overachieved probably for at least half the season and then met expectations the other half of the season. So I remain cautiously optimistic on that. This is the right hire for the right situation.
I think this is actually a good hire because it seems like Ryan is able to take this defense and control it himself. Whereas I feel like under Mike Caldwell, he had to help Mike Caldwell out a lot. Yes, Mike Caldwell was aggressive, but you saw that there were miscommunications, blown coverages, things that kept messing up. And Doug probably had to help Mike as it was his first time being a defensive coordinator. And he just probably needed a lot more help. Where, as we have seen, the offense, once Doug kind of stepped away from it and tried to take a holistic view and be a head coach that helps defense and maybe a little bit of offense here and there, didn't work. He needs to go back and help out just the offense and needs a guy that can run the defense. And I feel like Ryan is that guy. He did it pretty much with the Saints and then the Falcons. And those guys never had all-star talent. He's making those defenses good with average to below average players, which we kind of have on defense. So that's another good thing I feel like is he's not a defensive coordinator who had Micah Parsons and all these giant stars, Nick Bosa. He mostly had kind of average defensive stars.
I think where Doug Peterson gets at what aggressive is, it's a different style, and it's a different style of aggression specifically in coverage. So another big stat a lot of people are talking about is that the Falcons were a top 10 team in terms of running man coverage, where the Jaguars lean very heavily on zone. And so, which makes me a little nervous because I'm going to be honest, our cornerbacks are not anything to write home about.
We didn't have the personnel for man. That was the problem. You can't put can't put Buster Brown on an island or a banged up Campbell on an island, and Herndon's fine, but not nearly good enough to hang with most of the best slot receivers. And so I get that, but I don't think we had the personnel to do that. And so it's hard to tell how bad, quote unquote, Caldwell actually was, and if you'd actually be willing to play more man. I just don't think he had the personnel for that.
Oh, for sure. I think Mike Caldwell was a bit of a scapegoat this year. I mean, they gave him no help, no draft picks, no free agents, and then blamed everything on him. The real question is, now that you went out and got Ryan Nielsen, are you going to give him some help? Go out, draft some top players, go and free agent and go get some stars so that way he can succeed. The real question is, will Baalke help bolster up Ryan Nielsen, whereas he didn't help bolster up Mike Caldwell at all?
That leads us into our next segment, which I would love to hear from you guys as we think about the offseason, and you can go in the direction of free agency, draft, but we're a few weeks in for the Jaguars offseason. What are your top 3 goals for the Jaguars where you say these are priority number 1, 2, 3 for the Jaguars to get right to be ready for the 2024 season?
Here, I'll take the first one. You guys can have the other ones. But look, over the last 3 weeks, we've heard rumors that, Baalke doesn't like Press Taylor. We've heard, Trevor Lawrence doesn't like Press Taylor. We've heard Doug doesn't like Baalke. We're hearing all this type of division and finger pointing going from player personnel to coaching to all sorts of things. Yes, Joey, you're exactly right. Caldwell was the scapegoat in this situation. But my concern is it feels like you have a locker room that's already splintering. That's kind of actually how Doug Peterson left Philadelphia, where the owner wanted Jalen Hurts being played. The GM wanted Jalen Hurts being played, but Press Taylor and Doug Peterson didn't want that. So the number one key, regardless of who gets signed or who doesn't get signed, is the front office and the coaching staff need to be on the same page, because the vibes we're getting is that that's not the case. And yeah, maybe some of that's exaggerated, but when there's smoke, there's usually fire. And I think what's going on is there's a lot of question marks going on. Do we actually have everybody on the same page? And quite frankly, I don't know how that gets fixed unless people start to come together.
Oh, I think there's a lot of smoke and a lot of fire. I mean, you didn't have to watch Baalke's press conference long to see that he was putting a lot of the blame on the coaching staff and the development and almost none of the blame on himself. And so this team is, I'm a buyer at the stock here low, but there's a reason why the Jaguar stock is low too, because there's a lot of fractures, a lot of friction, and a lot of fans saying, hey, just give it to Baalke and Press Taylor and let's almost start clean slate.
Well, here's the problem. Because Doug has refused to get rid of Press Taylor, anything that goes wrong with him is now on Doug. The last year was an absolute okay, you know what, Doug, you've earned the right for us to look past some of those things and not to hold you accountable. But at this point, it's Doug and Baalke. If your decision is to keep Press Taylor, I would not be as much of a buyer of Jaguar stock. I thought the stock was way too low going into last year, despite us being only 20 minutes away from beating the Chiefs. And now I'm getting bad vibes in Jacksonville right now.
Yeah, Doug has definitely tied his fate to Press and what this offense does next season. I mean, you could kind of tell with the Ryan Nielsen hire, that's a guy who a lot of people had rumors of possibly being a head coach. So if the offense stinks next year and the bottom falls out for the Jaguars, Doug is definitely out the door and they will groom Ryan Nielsen to take over. I think that's pretty obvious. But
I disagree with that because I don't disagree with that.
He would be the young guy that a lot of people thought could be a head coach.
You don't hire defensive coordinators as head coaches outside
Houston just did it, and
I understand Houston
and there
did
seems to be a mindset going that direction.
No, everybody, there's no mindset going that way. No, here's the problem: if your offensive coordinator proves that he's good, he will leave and go be a head coach somewhere. You want to have the stability on offense. That is the key. That look at San Francisco, you look at Kansas City, you look at all these other places. Yes, there are anomalies, for example, Houston, but here's the problem. Let's say Houston's OC goes either in this year or next year. What does their offense look like? Probably still pretty decent with CJ Stroud, but you would much rather have the consistent side of the ball being the offensive side of the ball. It's a problem with Buffalo. Everybody was ready to run out McDermott, and they still kind of are because they're not able to get over the hump, and you have a revolving door at OC.
That's a way of looking at it, but it's pretty obvious that Baalke wants to go that way, that this is Baalke's idea.
It's not going to be Baalke's decision, but if we have another losing year.
That's a possibility, but I think Baalke has a contingency plan on how to get Doug out of there and possibly keep himself as the GM.
if the Jaguars collapse, though, it feels like if we miss the playoffs again next year, because you have so many big decisions going into next year with Trevor Lawrence, I think if we miss the playoffs again, it's got to be clean slate. Baalke, Peterson, Press, I think they're all gone. But it is an interesting take because, Joey, I did see several Falcons fans talking about they wanted Nielsen as the new head coach for the Falcons. Of course, the Falcons didn't go that direction. So it's not out of the realm of the possibility. If the Jaguars defense shows up and they're really strong and the offense struggles yet again, who knows?
Definitely. But another way, as we saw last year, it seemed like their relationship between Baalke and Doug was very good. Winning covers up a lot of mistakes. I think once you get back on the winning train, I think that relationship can be saved if they go out and get the right players this offseason. Let's get back to what this Jags team needs to do to get back into the winning thing, because we did have a first half of the season where we were 8-3 and everything seemed to be good. So maybe instead of trying to blow everything up, how can we patch it up and possibly fix it over the long term instead of getting rid of everyone right away? And I think that goes with number one thing you got to do this offseason is build up that offensive line. The offensive line was absolutely the main problem in the Jaguars. And I think it all starts with the center. The center is the most important part of this offensive line. And you had a center on his butt half this season who I saw running around with his head cut off, not knowing who to block, where to go. It looked terrible. And what really frustrates me is why I understand coaches and other people don't want to like rag on one specific person, but they're going out of their way to protect Luke Fortner and keep saying, "Oh, I think he can play." But everyone says he can't play. Why are they doing this? There's a way to be like, yeah, we're going to go possibly look at getting some competition there, or let the fans know that you understand and that you're going to do something. You don't have to go out and be like, no, actually, he is a good player. I know everything you see says he's not a good player. I understand that every analyst says he's the worst player probably in the NFL, but no, you're all wrong. He is actually a really good NFL player, and he deserves to be the starting center for this team.
Well, it's not just the fans, Joey. It's the players, right? It's the messaging that you're sending to the players that, hey, you know what? Mediocrity or below average play is fine. Like we'll reward that. We're going to tolerate that. We're going to look the other way because they know, I mean, part of the reason, again, why I've been so hard on the Press Taylor situation is Trevor Lawrence is literally scrubbing the play at the line of scrimmage 10 to 15 times a game. And so, like, even if you say Press is fine, he's doing the right things, he's putting the right things, clearly your quarterback doesn't fully trust the offensive plays the coordinator is calling. And so there's some level of non-synergy. You're not on the same page there.
Yeah, that's my number 2 offseason goal is rebuild the interior lines, both offense and defense, because we just got bullied. We could not run the ball up the middle. Every third and short, we got stuffed. Every third and short for the other team, they ran it right up the gut on us. Joey, you did a great piece in our last episode on Devon Hamilton and just the mess that situation was. But my number 1 offseason goal is you've got to re-sign Josh Allen. He just dominated defensively this past year. He just smashed the franchise sack record. He's only 26 years old. And apparently the rumors are that Josh Allen's camp is mad because Baalke hasn't talked negotiations with him, which is crazy. But this has to be goal number 1, because if you lose Josh Allen in this offseason, this defense is toast. I don't care how good of a coach Nielsen is. You have no pass rush. Trayvon Walker is going to go down because all the attention will go to him. That's got to be number 1 to me. You've got to get Josh Allen back. Blank check. The guy is good. He should be a lifelong Jaguar.
Yeah, I mean, you heard Baalke. If we don't sign him, they are going to tag him. There's no way they let him walk out of the building. But the reason you go ahead and re-sign him is so that way his cap hit won't be as big than the tag. You can push off the money and have more money to spend this offseason for other people. And most likely, if you tag Josh Allen, Calvin Ridley's gone. And there's going to be teams like the Chiefs who just need a really good wide receiver, and they're going to pay out the wazoo for someone like Calvin Ridley. We will lose our guy and create a giant hole in our wide receiver core because we don't get a deal done with Josh Allen. There's implications here with just more than just Josh Allen. We have to get a deal done, not just tag him.
Here's the other problem with tagging Josh Allen. Number one is the message you send. Hey, you break records, smash records, and yet we don't reward you with a long-term deal. And number two, the other problem is there's no guarantee Josh Allen would play on a franchise tag. If I'm Josh Allen, I can go get paid somewhere in the open market. Why would I not hold out? I don't want to play a one-year deal, potentially get hurt when I'm healthy all season, when he's been historically very healthy for us. He deserves a big payout. He deserves a long-term deal. And it's a win for the Jaguars. It's a win for Josh Allen. He loves Jacksonville. He loves Duval. It's the most obvious move ever. And yet I'm still nervous that's going to happen.
Yeah, and that goes back to what we've been saying is there's miscommunication in the front office. Nobody trusts them, the players, the coaches, and certainly not the fans. And so who knows what's going to happen? I just don't feel like we have the right people making those key decisions.
And you talk about trust. One way to get the players and everyone and get some trust back into this locker room is trust that Josh Allen's going to do it again. By doing a tag, it means, oh, I don't trust that you actually are that good. I don't trust that you can do it
Exactly.
again. I need you to show me again. How about you trust your players that not only will he do it in a contract year, but he'll do it even after you pay him. Trust your players.
Well said. And I think this is a good transition to what we want to talk about next, right? It's looking at these free agents. It's who should we keep? Who should we cut? Who should we extend? We've obviously talked about Josh Allen. All three of us are not only in the sign him category, but extend him category. Let's look at the next couple, though, that I think are a little bit more interesting. Jamal Agnew is up next. Obviously been a huge player for us on the special teams when he's been healthy, and we've been able to incorporate him more and more into the offense, sometimes on the good side, sometimes not necessarily very good. What are we doing with Agnew?
Here's my deal with a lot of these free agents. Look, we saw what happened last year when we ran back essentially the same team. It didn't work. And I think we need new blood, new DNA. Look, I like Agnew. I hate to see anybody walk, but the reality is I think Parker Washington is pretty comparable in terms, especially a punt returning. I think Parker Washington is a better receiver than Agnew, so I'm fine with letting Agnew walk here.
Depends on, I guess, how much money he wants. I'm not in the – there's some fans who are ready to walk away from Agnew. The absolute spark and, like, game flipping and – game energy bringing that Agnew brings, he was a huge part of the fantastic 2022 season where he'd flip the entire field on a punt return or go return a kickoff for a touchdown. Being able to bring that fire into the offense, and a team that obviously needs it, they feed off emotion and that energy. I don't think you can just go ahead and let Agnew walk away. He seems to be better at getting a wide receiver. It wasn't his first position, but each year it does seem he's getting a little bit better. I'd like to see what he does next year.
I agree with you, Joe. I completely disagree with you, Jack. He's much better than Parker Washington. He is one of the top 3 game-changing players in special teams. Parker Washington, I think, is just a guy, even though he might be better at wide receiver. The price will be a determining factor, but I would much rather keep him. What about Smoot?
Oh, he's lost a step, and I don't think that he's going to get it back, unfortunately. Love Smoot. Great guy, Jaguar guy, but I just don't think he's got it anymore. I mean, you can keep him around if you can get him really cheap, like league minimum as a bring in 5th rotational guy, but he's definitely not your 3rd rotational guy, maybe not even your 4th.
Yeah, if you're a 3rd or 4th or 5th rotational guy, he was $3.5 million last year. I think he's a cut. He's going to be 29 next year. I don't think he's somebody you resign.
Yeah, you're going to hear a reoccurring theme from me a lot. I'd say let him walk.
Chase on. I don't know if we need to talk about that one that much. Walk.
You won't even be in the NFL.
Triple walk.
What about Trey Herndon? I think this is also a walk, especially with the emergence of Antonio Johnson last year, the rookie.
Definitely. I would say walk. He's going to want a lot more money than I think he's actually worth. And there's a lot of good cornerbacks in this draft that I think will be just as good as he is.
I actually think it depends on the money here. If it's a team friendly deal, I'm happy with re-signing him. He, of a lot of these guys, was actually one that showed improvement in 2023. That's the big thing to me, and that's not to go off Agnew again, but I'd rather see improvement than a guy who had a great year in 2022. Harden improved. If it's a good deal, take him. If it's too much, yeah, you gotta let him walk.
33-year-old Tyler Shatley.
I love
Well,
Shatley, actually. That man is so steady Eddie. Whenever someone goes down,
He
he's
should have been our
in.
center.
And it doesn't ever seem to really get that much worse when he's in there. He's not like perfect where he's gonna start, but the drop off's not that bad, and he does really solid. We win when he actually was in there. So depending on what he wants, I'd still keep him as a pretty good backup.
I agree with you in that sense, Joey, but he's 33 he'll be 33 next year. I think you got to let him walk. Eventually he's going to hit that age cliff and there'll just be nothing left in the tank.
Yeah, I'm not super passionate about this one way or the other. I will say I do think we need to keep a few of our offensive line veterans because I think that's going to be an area where we draft a lot of rookies. So I don't hate letting Shatley. He does bring good versatility, guard and center. So you know what, Joe, you convinced me. Re-sign him for good team-friendly deal.
Good grief, guys. Well, I think the next guy is the guy you re-sign at guard, the 26-year-old Ezra Cleveland, who actually is $1 million cheaper than Tyler Shatley as of 2023. Granted, he was on his rookie deal.
Oh yeah, definitely. That one's I think is a no-brainer. You try to re-sign Ezra Cleveland because she's going to be most likely your starting left guard this season. I was talking about Shatley as just a backup signee. Cleveland, you sign as a starter.
Yeah. Cleveland's going to get paid substantially more than Shatley. Yeah. So yes, because you can't draft all new guys on the offensive line. Cleveland was solid. He had a lot of injuries. I think he has a bounce back year for us. I would love a 2 to 3 year deal here. I don't necessarily want to go a 4 or 5 year deal because there are some question marks, but I do think he should be one of the top guys from our team that we're looking at re-signing.
Agreed. McManus, I'm assuming we're all cutting, especially since Doug and him.
No.
Doug and him are not on the same page. And then the rest, I'm going to save Calvin Ridley for the end, but the rest of the guys, Dearness Johnson, Blackson, Quarterman, Chris Claybooks, Tim Jones, Gregory Jr., Ledbetter, any of those guys you think worth re-signing that you liked how they played and you could get them pretty cheap?
I liked Blackson, even though we kept healthy scratching him for Hamilton down the line. I thought he was a good plug-in for Hamilton when he was on the IR and seemed to play well. He's not like going to start or anything, but he's a guy. If you get him really cheap, maybe you keep him. But Gotsis and all those other guys, they were terrible, I think. So I say almost let them all walk.
Gotsis wasn't on that list, but fair. We let Gotsis walk anyways.
Again, hopefully there's a lot of new blood, new energy, new DNA, whether it's through free agency, whether it's through a lot of draft picks. A couple of those guys, I don't mind if we bring them back really cheap, but none of them really exciting. None of them are guys I'm like, oh, we got to get back for one reason or the other.
Yeah.
I'm not hyper passionate about any of those guys that you just listed off, JT.
And I think that brings us to Calvin Ridley. And he's somebody that's been pretty divisive among some Jaguars fans. Some people say absolutely bring him back. He had 1,000-yard receiving, like all those reasons. If you do bring him back into a new deal, I believe that the price tag is going to be a 2nd-round pick. If you let him walk, the price tag is still going to be a 3rd-round pick. And essentially you use that as a 1-year rental for Calvin Ridley. I think there is some ambiguity if you do a franchise tag. I think that only costs us a 3rd-round pick, but then you're probably going to be overpaying Calvin Ridley for who he is, and he's unrestricted. So he there's a possibility that he will want to shop himself on the market because he's still on his rookie deal, despite the fact that he's 29 years old. With the injuries and the suspension and all of those other things. So he's probably going to want to get paid, and he's certainly going to want a long-term deal. What do you guys think we should do with Calvin Ridley? And then what do you think will actually happen with Calvin Ridley?
I mean, the best thing for the Jaguars is definitely tagging him. I think he absolutely would get more than a tag out in the market, as I said, because he would be the top guy available in the free agency. And there's a lot of teams that need wide receivers. So there will be teams that overpay for him and give him more than the tag. So if the Jaguars really want to keep him, which we need him, I don't think he was what we might have thought he could have been. Like he didn't hit his ceiling, but he was definitely very good, and we don't win some of the games that we win without him. So I would definitely tag him. Whether we do that or not is what we end up doing with Josh Allen, and it's going to be sickening to see him possibly go to the Chiefs and see the Chiefs steal another one of our players. That would really, really suck.
Some takes I have, I will change my mind because evidence proves otherwise. But this is one I said a month or 2 months ago. Look, I think and this is not going to be popular. I feel like over the offseason, more and more people have shifted towards let's bring Ridley back. He's going to be better. Somehow the Ridley hype is growing again, that this was just, first year back. He didn't play for 2 years. He was rusty somehow for 17 straight weeks, and he's going to be amazing next year. Look, at the end of the day, Trevor's completion percentage to Calvin Ridley was 57%. I don't hate Ridley. I think he's a solid wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. But if you franchise tag Ridley, that's going to be over $20 million of the cap you have in Ridley. Yep. You're paying Kirk close to $20 million. So you got $40 million in Ridley and Kirk, who are nice, but that's not exciting, especially, and here's the big reason I let Ridley walk. I think this is the best wide receiver class in the draft in a long time, maybe ever. Mel Kiper's talking about it, the best in 20 plus years. And so I think you get a better guy from day one in round 2 than Calvin Ridley right now. And who's going to have a much brighter potential. Yes. And he's going to be infinitely cheaper.
Oh,
he'll be 8 years younger.
Swing and misses on wide receivers is outrageous for the Jaguars. And you really want to trust Trent Baalke to be able to pick a wide receiver that would actually hit as good as Calvin Ridley out of the draft? That was terrible take, Jack.
Well, that's why Joey, your point is my point. And that is, if you want Calvin Ridley, don't overpay him with a franchise tag, essentially another 1-year rental, sign to a 3-year deal. If you really believe in Calvin Ridley, take your medicine, take the second round pick that you've agreed to at this point and re-sign him, because to your point, Joey, we can't draft in the second round anyways. We got a third string backup, quote unquote, blocking tight end who still can't be on the field and blocking downs. And so, yeah, if you want him, sign him for the second. Otherwise, let him walk. Personally, I don't really care either way, because I kind of agree with you, Jack, in the sense that there are so many great, talented young guys. He is 29. But the frustrating thing is it doesn't matter, because whoever we get, we still have Press Taylor calling the plays. And how many times did we watch Calvin Ridley do essentially 2 routes, a 15-yard comebacker at the sticks or a deep out? And so if we're not going to utilize him to be able to catch the ball and run in space, which I think he's more than capable of, we've seen those videos of him beating people off one-on-one, throw a couple of slants, throw him over the middle, see what happens, give him a chance to make some yards after the catch. But I don't think we're going to do that. My gut says we're going to end up franchising him because we want to keep our second round pick, and we'll end up signing Josh Allen, which is what it is.
My first thing would be asking Trevor Lawrence straight up, do you want Calvin Ridley? Because it is obvious that Trevor Lawrence is way better with wide receivers that he has chemistry and is comfortable with. And I never got that chemistry and comfortability with Calvin Ridley. I understand he's really good and we wouldn't really want to lose him. But if him and Trevor aren't on the same page, then I guess I am with Jack. I'd figure out and just let him go and find someone that Trevor is comfortable with. I wouldn't go in the draft because of Baalke's history of picking. I'd try to go get a free agent that Trevor's comfortable with. Everyone wants T. Higgins, whether we would actually get him or not. Someone that Trevor has amazing chemistry with is more important, I think, than actually how good they are, because Trevor can make them better if he has amazing chemistry with them, because I don't think Zay Jones is that great, but when they are clicking and they have their chemistry on, I think Trevor makes Zay Jones a lot better than he is. And that's what I think you need to go and find, is someone that he has that connection with. Edelman and Wes Welker and all those other guys weren't that great, but Tom Brady was able to elevate them because he had that chemistry. So you need to find the wide receiver that Trevor just clicks with. And if it's not Calvin Ridley, then maybe you let him walk.
T. Higgins has been injury prone, and he's going to be way too expensive. I don't really want him at this point.
I know, but that chemistry, I'm telling you, it's worth a lot more than a lot of people are.
Then go get Justin Ross, who's sitting on the practice squad somewhere, who had an ACL injury.
Justin Ross, better than Calvin Ridley, going to be our wide receiver 1.
There you go.
Mike Evans. Mike Evans is another big name. To me, he's too old for a big time contract that he is going to ask for, but he is the opposite. T. Higgins, he's Mr. Steady. He's got 8 straight seasons of over 1,000 yards, would bring a veteran presence. And so, hey, maybe those two guys drive up the market and Calvin Ridley is cheaper. Because, look, I'm fine if we are able to get a great deal on Calvin Ridley, but I don't want to pay $20 million to Calvin Ridley. That's not, he's not a wide receiver 1. He's just not. He had one amazing 1,400-yard season, and he had over 1,000 yards with the help of a 17th game, but he's not a superstar wide receiver, not in this league. All right. Well, a lot of interesting moves for the Jaguars in free agency. And of course, we are less than 3 months away from the NFL draft. But before we talk about the 2024 draft, we want to go back. In fact, one of our new subscribers on YouTube, shout out to Colorado Jag fan who subscribed and shared. You know, Joey, he was all about your take on Phil Rauscher and how he is not getting more of the blame. But he also asked, you know, what should we cover in the next episode? And he said, give us a breakdown of the last couple of years of draft picks. So we're going to do 2021 today. Yeah, so 2021 was Baalke's first draft class. And so as we look at it, we're going to go backwards and work our way up to the number 1 pick. And we'll grade the guys that have any sort of impact or say, look, 6th round, Jalen Camp, 6th round, 209th pick, wide receiver out of Georgia Tech, no impact. 1 catch, 7 yards, hasn't been in the league in several years. That's an F. But as we look at the 5th round, this guy's still on a roster. So Luke Farrell, drafted in the 5th round, tight end out of Ohio State. What would you guys grade that draft pick?
I'd give it a C. 5th round tight end, still on the team. Had a few catches and a blocking kind of 2nd, 3rd string tight end. C, whatever.
Yeah, I would give him a C as well. He's gotten on the field. He's made catches. I've been pleased with his performance.
Yeah, I would say C as well. Look, he came off his best year, which was 13 catches, 155 yards. It was not good blocking, but solid receiver. The 4th round was rough, so we'll fly through these 2 picks. Jordan Smith, a linebacker out of UAB in the 4th round. He had 1 tackle for us, not in the league anymore. And then Jay Tuafili, 4th round defensive line out of USC. Hey, he doubled that. He got 2 sacks for us and then was waived. And now he's a rotational player for the Bengals. But let's get into some of the actual interesting guys that we hear, that we see a lot. Andre Cisco was picked number 65 in the 3rd round out of Syracuse. What would y'all grade that draft pick?
I give him a solid B for this 3rd round safety. Seems to have potential to be like a Pro Bowler. He starts off the season well, then kind of gets injured though, and doesn't come back quite the same. So there is some injury proneness, but if he can stay healthy, does seem like a really good safety.
Yeah, a lot of Jag fans love him. They might even rate it an A. I think the B plus range makes sense for me. I do think he's got a higher ceiling, but we just haven't seen that yet. But I like his play.
Yeah, I'm one of those guys that would give him an A, especially because it's the 3rd round pick. Of course, all these grades will be based off of where they're taken to. So we're not comparing Cisco to Lawrence, with Lawrence being the number 1 overall pick. Look, he's got over 160 tackles. He's a playmaker. He finished the top 10 this past season in terms of interceptions. He's had 17 pass deflections in his career. He's a hard hitter, and he's only 23. So I do think he's got a much higher ceiling as well. But then we get into the first 2 rounds, and we have Walker Little drafted in the second round, pick 45 out of Stanford.
D. He was supposed to be able to go ahead and win himself a starting position. He was drafted in the second round, pretty high, and he's been given opportunities, and he's just not been able to take them. He was played right tackle and didn't play that very well. He started off well left tackle, but then we kind of switched him to left guard, and then back to left tackle, and he got hurt, and he just really hasn't ever solidified himself as a starter. And so now we don't know if we can really count on him to take any role. Is he better than a swing tackle his entire career? I don't know. I don't think he's got that high of a ceiling.
There was one point where people said he was our best tackle and guard on the team at the beginning of the season. So
Those are wrong.
That's fair, but it's hard for me to say a D, but your point is valid. He has not won a starting position. He did not start at all his first year. His second year, he played a decent amount due to injuries to the starters. And this year, he's played a decent amount, but hasn't looked amazing. I would want to give him a C. He is younger, and he has played for us a lot of meaningful snaps.
I was going to take that C minus. Joey, great point. He's played in 40 games, only started 17. Yeah, once you get the first, second rounds, you want a starter. First round, you want a star. But we had one more pick, the first pick of the second round, Tyson Campbell, cornerback out of UGA. What do y'all grade Campbell?
I give Campbell another solid B. It seems like he's got a really high ceiling. He got hurt, and I think we put him in way too early this year, and it didn't really have success for him. I think that he can definitely be even more than he has been. He's been a solid starter, though, so far. So I give this a good solid B.
Yeah, he was a younger guy, didn't have a lot of production in college, similar to Trayvon Walker when he was at Georgia, but he had a lot of the attributes. We saw the second half of the season last season. He was playing at an A+ level. This season, he was probably playing closer to a C. So I will also go in that B with the potential that this could be better.
Yeah, this one's brutal because if you had graded him after 2022, I would have had him down as an A+. He was that good in his second year, making plays all over the field, 15 pass deflections in 2022, 3 picks, all these other great things, 70 tackles. But his injury has caused some serious questions to me. And can he get healthy? Will he come back as that star player in 2022? So I drop it from an A+ to a C+. He is only 23. He does have potential to easily get that back up. But he was a liability for us on defense this year.
Wow, that was a big drop. I don't put that so much on him. I put that on the coaches for putting him out there in a losing situation.
Sure, we'll see. But at cornerback, you need speed. And so if he comes back next year and doesn't have that
especially if we're going to be playing a lot more man. So that'll be interesting.
Yep, definitely true.
So we'll see. Yeah, I mean, that I'm just going to grade off where it's at, but it could easily change. As obviously, I change it dramatically here. But first round, the 2 Clemson guys. We'll start with Travis Etienne, pick number 25, running back. What do y'all grade Etienne?
Solid A. He's gone over 1,000 yards both times. I think he got a lot of production out of a terrible line. I don't even know how he got 1,000 yards this season. He runs hard, has a ton of broken tackles. He had a little bit of a fumbling problem last year, completely fixed it this year and had 0 fumbles. I love to see that improvement. I think he's going to get even better. I love the work ethic that he has. It seems really, really good. I think he's a very, very solid A.
I'll go A- for most of the same reasons outside of the fact that you really shouldn't be taking running backs in the first round anymore, but he's done great. The only other thing to add, this year, he also really improved his game out of the backfield. It felt like he caught a lot of balls in the passing game, which is exciting to see. And so he's been good.
Agreed. A's all around here. Yeah, 2 other stats that he improved in was he found the end zone a lot more this season with 11 touchdowns and 0 lost fumbles this year. So solid A.
And Jack, before you jump into Trevor, I do want to call out one thing because we did start with 2021. Baalke was actually the director of player personnel in Jacksonville for the 2020 draft. And if you quickly look at that, you see, yikes, And so obviously Dave Caldwell was the GM, but how much of that was Baalke's decision making too? You had CJ Henderson and Chase on in the first round, awful. Chenault in the second round, Devon Hamilton in the third round, Ben Barch and Josiah Scott and Shaq Quarterman in the fourth round, and obviously a bunch of no names for the rest of it. That entire draft, you have 0 players making positive impacts on the team currently, which you have an entire whiff of an entire year is just brutal, especially when you had about 10 picks, including 2 first-round picks, is just a terrible showing for the Jaguars there.
Great points, JT. Yeah, 2021 was not a pretty time for the Jaguars at all in so many ways. But at the end of the day, so much of this draft class is going to be great off the number 1 overall pick, Trevor Lawrence, quarterback out of Clemson. What do you guys grade that draft pick?
As of right now, I don't give him an A. I think I give him a B plus, because he was the first pick overall, and he seemed to regress a little this year. It seemed like he was ascending last year, really coming up. Now he did have a bunch of injuries. He hurt his head, shoulders, knees, and toes, and really kind of got knocked around. He seemed to be a little bit flauncy with the ball, giving it away, not being able to hold on to it. That's a little scary, and there's some question marks. And as a number 1 pick overall, you don't really want question marks. So I'm going to have to drop him down to a B plus as of right now. Now, obviously, with his ceiling could be an A plus, but with his stats, what he's done this 3 years, it has to be a B plus. If not, that might be a little high.
Well, let's table this for a second. So at the beginning of the season, we all said Trevor Lawrence is probably the 6th or 7th best quarterback in the NFL with a potential of a very good year to vault himself into the top 3. Well, obviously he did not have a good year, and obviously he did not vault himself. And there were some quarterbacks behind him that started to come up. So the Mahomes, Burrow, Hurts, and Josh Allen, and all of those guys I think are solidified themselves in that like
Lamar
upper
Jackson.
tier. Lamar Jackson now, I think he was right there on the cusp. He certainly solidified himself in that top tier as well. But then we start going to Justin Herbert, Tua, CJ Stroud, Brock Purdy. Like, do you put all of those guys ahead? Dak Prescott, do you put all those guys ahead of Trevor right now?
Actually, I ranked all these quarterbacks for this season, and I will go ahead and list off every quarterback before we get to Trevor Lawrence, and we'll see just where Trevor Lawrence landed for this season. At number 1, I had Lamar Jackson. This factors in how good they did the entire season. It has stats and also how well the team did. And then Patrick Mahomes, number 2, he had a little bit of an off season this regular season, but he's still obviously the GOAT. We've seen him play in the playoffs. Super, super good. Brock Purdy showing that he is a really great guy, taking his team to the Super Bowl. I have him at number 3 for this season. Had a really good season. So 4, I had Dak Prescott, had a great regular season, terrible postseason. Jared Goff, Jordan Love out of nowhere, had really good year this year. Josh Allen struggled, but also had really great numbers as always. CJ Stroud having an incredible rookie season. Then next, Tua with all his yardage, has great wide receivers. Baker next, got him all the way to the playoffs, won a game in the playoffs. Matthew Stafford had a comeback season, made it to the playoffs. And then at number 12, I have Trevor Lawrence for the year after all those guys. So he went from being about the 5th best guy last year to all the way to 12 this year.
Who else? Who's your next couple right behind him?
Next was Derek Carr.
Well, and you have to remember a lot of these top guys too, if you're looking at an overall picture, were hurt. So Joe Burrow, of course, is going to be elite next year. Herbert's going to be elite next year. I'm probably forgetting a couple, but
Kirk Cousins is right there.
Looked amazing. Yep.
And so here's the reality of those situations. Obviously, Burrow and Herbert will be ahead of Trevor. Most of those quarterbacks you listed, including the Strouds and Loves, I think they have put more good stuff on film on a consistent basis than Trevor has at this point. it's very reasonable to say Trevor is probably the 11th through 15th best quarterback in the NFL right now.
Easily.
Agreed.
And people forget too, Kirk Cousins was having an incredible year before he got hurt. Aaron Rodgers didn't play at all. He could be above him. There's a ton of quarterbacks. He could be all the way down to 16, counting all the quarterbacks that were hurt that could be better than him.
And here's what I want to ask, because JT, you said a couple months ago on the podcast, you guaranteed Trevor would win a Super Bowl at some time in his career, maybe with Jacksonville, hopefully with Jacksonville. So what do you grade this draft pick?
It's tough because it depends on how you want to look at it. If you want to, like, he had to take Trevor. Trevor was the obvious pick there. You can't take Wilson. It's similar to Hutchinson the following year. Hutchinson was the obvious pick there, despite the fact that Walker's been good. So like in that sense, like, okay, you did what you're supposed to do. Like, what are you going to give him, an A+ because you did the obvious pick there? And Trevor has not lived up to that level of hype. A B+ seems fair, but like Trevor's actual play is probably closer to a C. The actual pick itself, I don't know. I feel like a blind monkey could have picked Trevor Lawrence that year.
I will say, yeah, this is an interesting one to grade. I think I agree, JT, if you grade off expectations, like Trevor was the biggest prospect in a long time. He has not lived up to expectations. Probably C there. But what should they have done? Of course, it was Trevor. And I thought about this too. What if you would do it over again? Would you still select Trevor? And I think yes, because look at the rest of the quarterbacks.
Well, I'm not taking
Look
Zach
at the rest
Wilson.
of the quarterbacks. Yeah, you have Zach Wilson, bust. Trey Lance, bust. Justin Fields, who they're thinking about,
Bust.
moving
No,
on
it's just
from.
a bust. Go ahead, say it.
So, and
he's
Mac
got
Jones.
Sparks, and obviously he was a bust too. And so, yeah, I mean, that was quote unquote the QB draft and all QB drafts. You also had Kyle Trask in there. Shout out to Gator fans. But Trevor was the obvious pick, and you still have to take him. You still have to ride or die with him.
Hang on. I didn't get to finish, because the interesting one, of course, is the very last pick was Brock Purdy. And that's where it gets interesting.
No one's
because
taking
those
him
are the
first
top
overall.
two. You're the one that ranked him third as quarterbacks. And he's
That was
playing
for
in the
this
Super Bowl.
season. That was for this season. I'm not saying that his overall longevity is higher than Trevor's. It's not. Trevor has way stronger of an arm, has way more potential, way bigger window than Brock Purdy. I was just talking about one little season. I say now, out of expectation, yes, as we've talked about, Trevor has only performed to about a C. But if you look 10 years down the road, who's going to be better? Hopefully it's Trevor Lawrence. He has all the potential and all the stats and tall and strong and competitor, but will he get there? We don't know.
Yeah. Purdy's a tricky one, because I would certainly rank Purdy over Trevor right now, not just from 2023 season, but going into 2024 season. And if you switch the quarterbacks, is there that much of a difference?
Oh,
I don't.
the Jaguars stink with Purdy. Let's be honest.
I don't know, because Purdy doesn't turn over the ball 60 times in 3 years.
Yeah, but we would never score a touchdown.
And he's
pretty
pretty accurate. He's pretty accurate.
He's accurate, and we would methodically move the ball and kick a field goal. That would be our offense. And I just don't think we're winning games.
That's better than what we've been doing, because so far we're methodically moving the ball and then turning over the ball in the red zone.
That's okay. That's true. But
I only brought that up because it's interesting. I mean, I still think you take Trevor. Look, at the end of the day, Purdy's got the best offensive weapons in the world around him, the greatest running back, incredible wide receivers, top 5 tight end, top 5
incredible offensive line.
Yeah, Trevor's got none of those. So all that to say, if you redid it, you still take Trevor. And because you needed a quarterback, look, you weren't going to, as big of a Minshew fan as I am, and I rock the Minshew shirt, you weren't going to keep rolling with Minshew. You know what his ceiling is, and that's middle of the road. Look, Trevor Lawrence in 2022, a slept-on fact, he was number 6 for NFL MVP vote in his second year in the season. So this is a bad year, and let's hope it's a rebound year for him.
It's going to need to be, because if he has another regression, it's going to be really difficult keeping him here. And that would destroy, I think, Jacksonville and Duval and the fan base.
And that's the scary part about the front office, is because it feels like we are setting ourselves up for a lot more finger pointing, a splinter locker room, and right back to like Jaguars circa 2018, circa 2013, circa 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15, all of the years of the 2010s.
Yes, the house is definitely on fire. The question is, will the floor fall out under us because of the fire, or will the firefighters get here in time, put it out, and we can save the structure? That's the real question this offseason.
Yeah, I don't know who the firefighters are, but they better be good. But yeah, so looking ahead, to wrap up today, here's the big dates to follow along, and we'll be back with y'all and hopefully a little bit. As JT said, we'll have a different cadence. You never know, there may be big Jaguars news and we need to jump on. But here's some of the big dates in the meantime. February 3rd, this weekend's the Senior Bowl. February 20th is when the franchise tag opens. So potentially Ridley, potentially Josh Allen, as we talked about. February 27th through March 4th is the NFL Scouting Combine. March 13th is when NFL free agency begins. So that'll be a huge day. That's always fun to see all those moves right at the beginning. April 15th, offseason workouts begin. And April 25th through 27th, hopefully the Jaguars finally get a home run NFL draft.
A lot to come this offseason. Stay with us as we try to cover it all. We'll be sporadic, as Jack said, as this offseason, try to hit some mock drafts and get the hype going, hopefully. And
hey, Joey, what did you say about mock drafts again?
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing a lot of mock drafts, getting ready for y'all, understanding these players and who could possibly be. And doing these simulators, it just showed me that being a GM, it's actually way easier than I ever thought. It is.
That's right.
I don't know what Trent Baalke was talking about. Oh, if anyone can do it, just step up. I'll step up, Trent Baalke. I can easily crush this draft class off these simulators. I understand that's not exactly how it will roll, but it's not as hard as you make it seem, Trent Baalke, and you make it seem very difficult, but it's not. So let's try to figure things out and work together to fix this team.
Love it. All right, you heard it here first. Joey, the new Jaguars general manager. As JT said at the top, engage with us on social media. We're on Twitter or X at the Jag Bros. We're on YouTube a lot more, posting content just for there. And of course, uploading our podcast episodes. But make sure wherever you listen, give us a listen, give us a 5-star rating. We want to give you a shout out too. Drop a 5-star review and we'll read it on the podcast. But we look forward to being back with y'all soon. And as we close, always do